Coming up next on the Delaware Way, getting rid of lead in old houses. Yes, it still exists in Delaware. And robots and surgery. This is the Delaware Way. Welcome to the Delaware Way. I'm Larry Menti. I still think we can say Happy New Year. And with the new year upon us, we're going to talk about how you can make Delaware and you healthier. With Dr. Karyl Rattay is here. She is the director for the Delaware Division of Public Health. Thank you for being here again. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to deal with two topics today, and one is the possibility of lead poisoning in the state, and the other is, of course, this time of year we always talk about the flu shot. But let's start talking about de-leading Delaware. That is a new initiative.
So the de-lead program, DE-lead, is it's a program that comes from a grant that we're receiving from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. It's a $3.2 million grant. So what it is intended to do is to help identify and fix homes where children are being exposed or could be exposed to lead-based paint.
It's amazing this is still a problem. I remember years ago, a couple decades ago, where people were talking about lead poisoning and paint chips and children eating paint chips. Here we are well into the 2000s and we're still talking about this. Is it really that prevalent?
Yeah, so it does remain a serious public health issue. And although blood lead levels have decreased in children compared to several decades ago, which is great. I mean, it used to be in the air from gasoline, and lead-based paint was everywhere. Well, in 1978, lead-based paint was banned from homes, but just this past year, we had almost 500 children in Delaware who were identified as having elevated blood lead levels. Even at lower blood lead levels, you can see impacts on the brain of young children who have been exposed to those lower levels. So a couple decades ago, we were addressing, much higher levels of lead in children, but now we're realizing even at levels that we use the numbers 5. So the CDC just recently decreased the level of concern from 10 to 5, where numerous studies are showing that even at these lower levels, children are impacted, where you see things such as lower IQ, learning disabilities, behavioral problems like hyperactivity and impulsivity and attention issues.
But even though the levels are lower, it's still, when you're talking about hundreds of children in Delaware, you want to fix the problem. And exactly how is the money spent? Do you actually go in and remove lead paint? When you say you're going to de-lead something, you de-lead a house?
Yeah, so the goal is to fix 250 houses in Kent and Sussex County. And a homeowner or a renter, if they're eligible, which they can find out through our program, somebody from the program will go out and assess the home to see if there is an issue with lead-based paint in their home. And if that is identified, then a contractor will be notified to come in and fix the home.
And if somebody is watching the program right now and they want to be involved in this program, or they're worried that they have lead in their building or home, how do they get in contact with you?
Yeah, so the easiest way is just to Google de-lead, and you'll get to our program and you'll find the information. First State Action Community Agency is the agency that we're working with to coordinate the effort, and so they could be notified directly as well. But the easiest way is just to go to DE-lead, Google it, and you can find out a lot more information about lead poisoning and lead poisoning prevention and this particular program.
All right, let's take a shift and let's talk about flu shots now. There are so many myths about getting the flu shot, and I would think they'd be dispelled at this point, but do you still run into people that, for instance, believe you can get the flu from a flu shot?
Absolutely, all the time. And the reality is you cannot get influenza from the flu shot, but there are people who, may coincidentally become ill within a few days of getting the flu shot and think that it is from the shot. I mean, in general, most people get a little soreness of their arm. You might feel a little bit more tired, but you cannot get the flu from the flu shot, and it remains our most effective means of preventing influenza.
Even though some years they don't get the mix right, it still is going to prevent several strains of the flu.
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, we had a very serious flu season. In fact, we had 28 deaths in Delaware. And what had happened was the virus, the flu virus that was predominant, mutated. And so the vaccine wasn't as effective. It actually still was somewhat effective. So those kinds of things happen. You could get a mutation, or you might find a flu vaccine that where the strain that circulates isn't in that vaccine. But we now have flu vaccines that cover 4 different influenza strains.
That's fascinating. That was actually the first time I heard it, and probably because I haven't been staying up with the story, but the initial reports was that they missed this one. But you're saying they didn't miss it, it just mutated, and to the point where the flu vaccine wasn't effective in beating it, for everybody.
Exactly. That's, it's just, we can't control what happens in the DNA of flu viruses.
No, I understand. Does it get frustrating to you? Because I know this message comes out all the time, and there's more people that die from flu-related symptoms in this country than have ever died, for instance, of the Zika virus or the West Nile virus or anything that the media kind of gloms onto and becomes the disease of the week. And yet you have this flu problem every single year. Have we done an effective job in getting the message out?
I think there's always more that can be done. Where we see a lot of the kind of lack of people getting flu vaccine is more of those younger adults, those invincibles who, up to age 40 or so, that think it's not going to happen to me. Even if you may not have the most serious consequences of flu vaccine, if you get sick, we're all around people who are more vulnerable at some point in our week, whether it's in the supermarket or in our homes or other places. And so, if you're a young, healthy person, you might just be sick on the couch for a week, but you also consequently may be introducing it to somebody who could have much more serious consequences.
And we're talking about tens of thousands of people that die every year from flu-related diseases. I don't think people understand or realize the numbers.
Yeah, it's interesting. We react as a society to things like Ebola and Zika, and we should, but it really isn't as alarming as the effect or the impact of influenza on a yearly basis.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. You're always fascinating. I appreciate it. Dr. Karyl Rattay, who is the director for the Delaware Division of Public Health. When we come back, we're going to stay on this health theme and talk about robotics and their use in surgery right here in Delaware when the Delaware Way continues.